Ad hoc judges in High Court. When and how can they be appointed? On Tuesday, the Supreme Court suggested temporarily appointing retired judges on an ad hoc as required basis to address the growing backlog of pending criminal cases before several high courts. Article 224A of the Constitution allows the Chief Justice of a High Court to request retired High Court judges to perform the duties of a judge again with permission of the President of India. Although it has rarely been invoked, there is a detailed procedure for such appointment, with the Supreme Court previously weighing in on the practice. The Supreme Court on Tuesday also suggested modifying the top court's 2021 decision, which held that ad hoc judge appointments could be made in certain situations. Article 224A, titled Appointment of Retired Judges at Sitting of High Court, states the Chief Justice of High Court for any state may at any time, with the previous consent of the President, request any person who has held office of a judge or that of the court or any other High Court to sit and act as a judge of the High Court for that state. Such appointees are entitled to allowances as determined by the President's order and have the jurisdiction, powers, and privileges of a judge of that High Court. Both the retired judges and the President of India are required to consent to the appointment. The detailed procedure can be found in the 1998 Memorandum of Procedure for the appointment of High Court judges, which was prepared after the creation of collegium system for appointing judges. It states that after the retired judges has consented to the appointment, the Chief Justice must forward her name and appointment details to the Chief Minister. The CM will pass this recommendation to the Union Law Minister, who will consult the Chief Justice of India before forwarding the recommendation, and CJI's advice to the Prime Minister of India. The Prime Minister will advise the President on whether to give her approval. However, in the case of Lok Prahari through its Secretary General S.N. Shukla IAS versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court held that recommendation has to be routed through a collegium of Supreme Court. This collegium includes CJI and two senior most judges of the Supreme Court. The court also provided guidelines for such appointments. In Lok Prahari, the Supreme Court was considering measures to address pending cases before the courts and the vacancies in posts of High Court judges. Having noted that the number of vacancies arising every year are barely filled in by the fresh appointments, at the time there were almost 40% vacancies across all high courts. The court also took note of some earlier reports of law commissions suggesting that temporarily appointing retired judges who have decades of experience is a viable solution to tackle the mounting backlog. However, the court expressed concern that Article 224A would encourage inaction in making recommendations for regular appointments, thus, it gave directions on when the process could be initiated. Most importantly, the court held that ad hoc judges can only be appointed when recommendations have not been made for less than 20% of the vacancies after considering both the number of active judges and pending proposals for appointments. This is so that Article 224A can be resorted to only on the process having been initiated for filling up the regular vacancies and awaiting their appointments. The court also held that there has to be a trigger point for appointing judges under Article 224A, as if the High Court has vacancies of more than 20% of the sanctioned strength, and if more than 10% of the backlog of pending cases is over 5 years. It further recommended that ad hoc judges should generally be appointed for 2-3 years, with 2 to 5 ad hoc judges in a court. In 2021, Supreme Court noted that there have only been 3 recorded instances of ad hoc judges being appointed under Article 224A, and it and called it a dormant provision. There were appointment of Justice Suraj Bhan to the Madhya Pradesh High Court in 1972 for 1 year to hear election petitions, appointment of Justice P. Venugopal to Madras High Court in 1982. His term was renewed for another year in August 1983. The appointment of Justice O.P. Srivastava to the Allahabad High Court to hear the Ayodhya titled suits. There are no recorded instances of ad hoc judges being appointed since the 2021 decision of the top court. Trump's tariffs threat. How do tariffs work and how to make sense of the US president's threat to use it against countries like China, Mexico, and Canada? What happened after Trump imposed tariffs on China in 2018? United States President Donald Trump has said he is considering putting a 10% tariff on Chinese imports because they are sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada and 25% on goods from those two countries. Because they are allowing vast number of people and fentanyl to come into the US, during the election campaign, Trump has threatened 60% tariff on Chinese goods. Last month, he said he would put 100% tariffs on BRICS countries if they tried to undermine the US dollar, a threat that he appeared to repeat while answering a reporter's question hours after becoming president. Tariff, Trump has said many times, is the most beautiful word in the dictionary and is indeed his favorite word. What exactly are trade tariffs and how do they work? A tariff is a tax that government imposes on goods imported into the country in question. A tariff is a tax that government imposes on goods imported to the country in question. For consider the following scenario. For example, product X, say car, manufactured in the US is sold currently for $120 and a similar car imported from China is sold for $100. Over time, as more American customers buy the cheaper car, imports from China rise. In consequence, as sales of the American car maker decline, the wages of its workers do not rise enough and some start to get laid off. The company stops hiring and also stops expanding. So no new jobs are created. The US trade deficit, the difference between the value of imports and exports increases. This essentially means more money flows out of the country. American consumers continue to get cheaper cars. The US government then imposes a protectionist tariff of 50% on all car imports from China. Why would the US government want to impose tariffs? Due to one or more of these reasons, protect the domestic car industry. Chinese car will now cost $150 instead of $100, and demand will arguably shift to a cheaper US made cars. The whole industry will be better off financially. Raising tax revenues, taxing a product that is well, selling well brings the government revenue. If the sole purpose is to raise more revenue, the tariff may not be 50% but only say 5 or 10% so that sales of Chinese cars don't completely dry up. Force Chinese companies to build their cars in the US. This is called foreign direct investment, and it is a good way to ensure that American consumers get better or cheaper cars and American workers don't lose their jobs either. How tariffs how might a country that is targeted by tariffs respond? There are several options. Dumping. Chinese car makers, if they have the resource to choose, can choose to simply absorb the tariff and continue to sell for $100. For example, a car is manufactured in US, is sold in the country for $120, and a similar car imported from China is sold for $100 over time. As more customers buy a cheaper car, imports from China rise, and consequence as the sale of the American car maker decline, the wages of its workers do not rise enough, and some start to get laid off. The company stops hiring and also stops expanding, so new jobs are created. The trade deficit, the difference between value of imports and exports increases. This essentially means more money flows out of the country. American consumers continue to get cheaper cars. The US government then imposes a protectionist tariff of 50% on all car imports from China. Why would US government want to impose tariffs? Due to one or more of these reasons. Protect the domestic car industry. Chinese car will now cost $150 instead of $100, and demand will arguably shift to a cheaper US made cars. The whole industry will be better off financially. Raise tax revenue. Taxing a product that is selling well brings the government revenue. If the sole purpose is to raise more revenue, the rate may not be 50% but only 5 or 10% so that sales of Chinese cars don't completely dry up. Force Chinese companies to build their cars in the US. This is called foreign direct investment. and it is a good way to ensure that American consumers get better or cheaper cars and American workers don't lose their jobs either. How might a country that is targeted by tariffs respond? There are several options. Dumping. Chinese uh, makers, if they have the resources, can choose to simply absorb the tariff and continue to sell for $100. The calculation would be to drive American car makers out of the market over time, and once they have a monopoly, raise prices and recover previous losses. Pass the tariff cost to the consumer. A Chinese firm can add 50% tariff to the price of the car so that American buyer who ends up paying the tariff. There will be inflation in the US while China will remain largely unaffected. In such cases, American car makers may raise their price from $120 to $140, still below $150 of the Chinese car, and make more money without necessarily improving the quality of the car or the efficiency of manufacturing it. The US government also earns more revenues in this case, but American consumers still bear the car cost. The US government also earns more revenues in this case, but American consumers still bear the cost. China sets a plant in the US. This is essentially what Trump wants. However, China may not want to do so given the higher labor and other input cost in the US. It may not be able to build that car for $100, and setting up a factory in US rather than in China would imply Chinese job losses. Trade rerouting. China may reroute their cars through countries such as Mexico and Canada that enjoy a free trade agreement with the US. So China exports an almost fully built car to Mexico, where it is repackaged and sold as a Mexican export to the US. Trade war. China may retaliate by counter tariffs on goods that it imports from the US, say corn or aircraft, or it can devalue its currency in such a way that the net effect of the US tariffs is zero. The exchange rate of Chinese renminbi is not fully determined by market forces. The response of any country to tariffs is usually a mix of these strategies. But it is important to note that tariffs, while attempting to favor domestic producers and government finances, almost always hurt domestic consumers. Large scale disruption of trade can raise prices and inflation and may fail to achieve the original goals of protecting domestic industry. Even when domestic industry is protected, the cost in terms of being saddled with substandard and costlier cars, as Indians were before the economic reforms of 1991, is borne by the domestic consumer. Did the tariffs imposed by Trump against China in his first term work? It depends on the parameter one looks at. If just the US China direct trade is considered, Trump's tariffs worked very well. Between 2017, the year before the first Trump administration, put 25% tariffs on many Chinese goods, and 2023 imports from China fell, and the overall trade balance, in this case deficit represented by a minus sign, reduced. But the picture of US trade with Mexico and Canada is different. In both cases, both US imports and trade deficits has ballooned. Ajay Srivastava, founder of the research organization Global Trade Research Initiative and former member of the Indian Trade Service, has pointed out that while US imports from China declined by $81 billion between 2017 and 2023, the overall US trade deficit across all trading partners widened as imports shifted to non Chinese sources, bypassing tariffs through FTAs. China showcased remarkable resilience, increasing its global exports by $1.1 trillion and cementing its role as a critical player in global supply chain for electronics, pharmaceuticals, and renewable energy. Contrast that to the US trade deficit, which increased from $516 billion in 2017 to $784 billion in 2023, According to Srivastav's study, the key beneficiaries of the trade war between US and China were Mexico, Canada, and Asian nations, which together accounted for 57% of the growth in US imports. The question for India: are Indian exporters ready and capable of using the opportunity if a new trade war begins, or could India become a market that passes through Chinese goods to the US without much value addition at the domestic level? Ajay Srivastava, founder of Global Trade Research Initiative, former member of Indian Trade Service, has pointed out that while US imports from China declined by $81 billion between 27 and 2023, the overall US trade deficit widened as imports shifted to non-Chinese sources, bypassing tariffs through FTAs. China showcased remarkable resilience, increasing its global exports by $1.1 trillion and cementing its role as a critical player in global supply chains for electronics, pharma, and renewable energy. Contrasting that to the US trade deficit, which increased from $516 billion in 2017 to 784 in 2023. According to Srivastav's study, the key beneficiaries of trade war between US and China were Mexico, Canada, and Asian nations, which together accounted for 57% of the growth in US exports. The question for India: are Indian exporters ready and capable of using the opportunity if a new trade war begins? Or could India become a market that passes through Chinese goods to the US without much value addition to the domestic level? Donald launches Dollar Trump. Why do meme coins divide even crypto investors? After emerging as a vocal crypto advocate during his presidential campaign, Donald Trump launched its very own crypto meme coin, Dollar Trump, on January 18, 2 days before his inauguration. Trump pitched the coin to his supporters as a way to celebrate everything we stand for, winning. The official website of the coin, however, carries a disclaimer stating that Dollar Trump is not an investment opportunity nor a security, that these meme coins are intended to function as an expression for support for and an engagement with. First Lady Melania Trump followed suit, releasing her own meme coin, Dollar Melania. Meme coins are cryptocurrencies that are often inspired by internet memes or trends. Although their value is based purely on hype and public perception, meme coins can attract heavy investment and build large followings. Unlike traditional cryptocurrencies, anyone can create a new meme coin for free by using launchpad platforms such as Pump.fun that are hosted on blockchain networks like Solana or Ethereum. In November last year, 13-year-old boy launched his own meme coin, meme coin called Quant, which went viral and netted him $30,000. Dogecoin is perhaps the best known meme coin out there. Initially released as a joke in 2013, it took off after being championed by tech billionaire Elon Musk. Today, Dogecoin is among the few cryptocurrencies assets to have kept up with the Bitcoin over several market cycles. What causes market cap of meme coins to skyrocket overnight? The market cap of any cryptocurrency is decided by the price of each coin and the number of coins available. Creators give meme coins liquidity by pairing them with popular cryptocurrencies such as Ether, but platforms such as Pump.fun set initial prices using their own formula. However, since meme coins are not strict tied to any underlying assets, they do not have any intrinsic value. Where many investors concerned stand out as the riskiest gamble in the crypto market, which is which is anyway considered to be speculative by many traditional investors. Due to their high volatility, meme coins have become notorious as hotbeds of the fraud. Over 40% meme coins are pump and dump scams, according to BDC report. Pump and dump refers to a form of fraud which price of an owned stock is artificially inflated, pumped through false and misleading positive statements. Meme coins are also used for rug pull scams where creators simply withdraw the funds and walk. After the launch of Dollar Trump, US Congress Maxine Waters said The meme coin represents the worst of crypto and shows why many regulators, advocates, and policy makers have been worried. Meme coins are also used for rug pull scams where creators simply withdraw the funds and walk like a 13-year-old behind the quant meme coin, leaving investors with a worthless token. Liquidity pull scam is also common. Here, fraudsters create a new meme coin backed by a liquidity pool of some well known cryptocurrency and then drain the pool, causing the value of the meme coin to become worthless in minutes. A mobile app that allowed US bound asylum seekers to schedule appointment with immigration authorities. CBS One app. In one of his first moves after becoming US President, Donald Trump shut down the mobile app designed to schedule appointments for people seeking asylum in the US. The CBS One entry program was instituted by Trump's predecessor Joe Biden that has enabled nearly 1 million people to enter into the US since 2023. The CBS One worked as a lottery system that awarded 1450 people with an appointments at 8 border crossings daily. It allowed migrants to plan interviews with immigration authorities to seek immigration parole before reaching the US border. Before the app was introduced, asylum seekers waited in large camps in Mexico while they hoped to secure exemptions to Title 42, a pandemic era public health order used by US government to turn away migrants. But since 23, CBS One has served as a sole route for asylum seekers amidst a large crackdown by the Biden administration on illegal border crossings. However, the app's implementation has not been easy. CBS One allowed asylum seekers to seek immigration parole without securing formal admission into the US. Parole may be granted for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefits. Once approved, migrants were allowed to stay in the US for up to 2 years. Throughout his presidential campaign, Trump maintained that Biden allowed an influx of undocumented migrants and promised to launch a massive deportation program after coming to power. All illegal entry was immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminals, aliens, back to the places from which they came. The new trade. India must be ready to seize the opportunities thrown up by rapidly changing global environment. In the weeks leading up to the Donald Trump's inauguration, there was considerable anxiety across the world over what the US president-elect would do on tariffs. Trump has repeatedly spoken about imposing tariffs on countries such as Mexico, Canada, and China. He has attacked India's tariff structure, pointing specifically at the 100% rate levied on some products. However, so far days after inauguration, there have been no policy take action. While Trump is now reported to have said that the tariffs on some countries will be imposed on Feb 1, there is an uncertainty on how this will play out. For India, the US is an important trade partner. Bilateral trade between two countries, $120 billion. Despite current rhetoric in Washington, there is a clear consensus on maintaining and strengthening India US relations. Only in October, the US and India signed an MoU to expand and diversify the critical mineral supply chain. The threat of levying tariffs may well only be a negotiating tool, but the Indian government is mindful of possible changes in the contours of US policy. As per the report in this paper, the Commerce Ministry has begun holding interministerial talks to prepare for likely changes in US policy so that could involve tariffs. Trump administration will, however, also offer opportunities. The America First Trade Policy Memorandum talks about bilateral trade agreements. It says that US trade representative shall identify countries with which the US can negotiate agreements on bilateral or sector specific basis to obtain market access. As per reports, during Trump's first term as president, India and US has discussed a trade deal. India's approach to trade agreement has been mixed in recent years. While it has entered into pacts with countries like UAE and Australia, it has also shielded away from agreements such as RCEP and has not joined the trade pillar of the Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership. While the bilateral agreement with the US should be explored, there are areas of concern. Trade deals may be linked to labor mobility, which is a complex issue and requires deft handling. There may also be concerns about intellectual property, labor markets, government procurement, and data localization, among others. Any such deal will necessarily involve reducing tariffs. India should take the lead here. It must undertake a broader and more comprehensive examination of its tariff structure and resist protectionism. Alongside, it must push through the US and UK trade agreements, negotiations it over which have been going on for some time now. It must also push through much needed reforms to take advantage of the opportunity that rapidly changing global environment may offer. The upcoming union budget is an opportune moment for the government to take the first step towards this end. There is no health agency with a WHO's reach and legitimacy. Trump's decision to withdraw from global body is myopic. Like his executive order to pull the US out of Paris Climate Pact, Donald Trump's decision to sever his country's link with WHO wasn't unexpected. In his first stint at the White House, Trump had taken steps to quit the premier global health agency, accusing it of failing to incriminate China for the COVID pandemic. Hours after the inauguration of his second presidency, Trump repeated the accusations. The US president had directed his country's agencies to pause the transfer of any US government funds or resources to WHO and identify credible partners to assume necessary activities previously undertaken by WHO. His executive order is myopic regarding the UN's body role in containing health emergencies across the world. There is no other organization with the WHO's reach and legitimacy that can deal with infectious diseases and devise protocols for containing cross border outbreaks. WHO's expertise is also indispensable in reducing the incidence of serious non communicable diseases such as cancer. The US is one of the WHO's founding member. It has historically been the largest financial contributor to the UN agency. It would, however, be reductive to see the engagement between the world's largest economy and its premier health agency through a purely economic lens. The US is a party to two WHO treaties, the agency's constitution, and the international health regulations, the governing framework for epidemic preparedness and response. At the height of the Cold War, WHO became the main portal for US Soviet collaboration in healthcare, which went on to play a seminal role in eradication of smallpox. The organization stewards a vast network of public health agencies, laboratories, and international scientists that constantly travel novel outbreaks. US institutes like CDC depend on his network for information. So does the US pharma industry. More than 20 WHO collaborating countries folk at the CDC and National Institutes of Health focus on US priorities, including cancer prevention and global health agency security. Trump's executive orders direct the US Secretary of State to cease negotiations on WHO's pandemic agreement, an international treaty to prepare for the future outbreaks. This is a great a threat to global health security architecture as the withdrawal of US financial support. The WHO needs reform, but deficiency in its governance and funding structures, highlighted by the COVID pandemic, need to be addressed by engaging the agency, not remaining outside it. The pandemic showed that no country is immune to the caprices of pathogens. Clipping the WHO's wings could hurt the resilience of not just poor and middle income countries. It could compromise the US preparedness against health emergency. Sleep may not primarily be a productivity hack, but it could well be the best one. Recent news from around the world that sleep, if not actively in danger, is at the very least vestigial habit that productivity conscious humans can be trained to manipulate or resist. A businessman from Japan has made headlines for claiming to sleep only 30 minutes a night for 12 years in the interest of high efficiency. Not a long ago, California based company REM Space sought to harness the power of dreams to enhance productivity. High achievers, especially, love talking how much sleep they are getting or not getting. Like when Apple CEO Tim Cook famously tweeted, "Got some extra rest for today's event, slept in like 4:30." Where does this leave the ordinary person who just wants to give her body the rest it needs? The example of actor Akshay Kumar may be the one to emulate. In an interview, his colleague Vivek Oberoi had commended Kumar's discipline in the matter of hitting the hay, saying that he sticks to his early to bed habits even when he has guests. Kumar has brushed off his colleague's observation. The conventions of hosting remain unaffected, he said, but perhaps he need not be so defensive. It is a well documented fact that good deep sleep for the recommended average of 7 hours a night is the surest way to ensure that one's body and brain are performing at their best at work or and at play. And if hosting duties interfere with slumber, slide, and call, they are best given a short shrift. In time when constant exhortations to work even longer hours in the interest of pick your poison career advancements, company bottom line, or a national progress, examples like Kumar's serve as a corrective, and those who insist on looking for workflow optimization in even the most basic of biological function should remember sleep may not primarily be a productivity hack, but it could well be the last one. Our own deep state, behind the economic slowdown, also to blame the Babu Raj and the friendly commentariat. It's the budget time again, and I'm still hoping that one of these days we will dispense with this closed door tamasha of policy making. This practice is still as same as in colonial times, and this nearly 200 longevity should hint at how outdated the system is. The practice is in the interest of TV and the IS babus who make the policy. Our GDP growth has surprisingly and inexplicably slowed down. World growth is expanding, even the IMF says so. So, why is the global star slowing down? There, this should be a first bit of accountability that is required from our monetary and fiscal policy makers. In various articles over the years and recently, I have pointed out that our monetary policy, high real policy rates, was dangerously close to policy errors and ensuring slowdown in 2018-19 before the shock of COVID. In this article, I want to point to the inexplicable policy of high rates of personal income and overall taxation, a policy I believe responsible for slowdown along with deep state inspired policy of high tariffs on manufactured goods and the same source inspired policy of closing of foreign direct investment. I want to expand on my comment about a deep state. First, who makes policy? Major industrialists, senior IAS babus, and their friendly influencers in the media. In all the justified criticisms of the government policy on FDI and high tariffs on manufactured goods, the uncalled for decision to remove the most favored nation for Switzerland and the uncalled for decision to remove most favored nation for Switzerland. Who are Nestle's competitors in India? Should we ask CII? I have yet to find a mention of a true authors of such policies. Notice that the list does not include policy experts outside the government, a common and universal practice in mature democracies. Both PMs Manmohan Singh and Narendra Modi explicitly argued for more lateral entries and failed. What is revealing is that MMS as a finance minister succeeded in seeking and implementing the advice of non-IS experts, but failed as PM when ostensibly he had more freedom to make good policy. Deep state at work. I will now present evidence of how messed up our fiscal policy taxation has been. First, why this observation collaborate with bringing down the fiscal deficit, not via growth but via increased taxation. Will this bring down inflation caused by food inflation? That would be laughable goal if not tragic. Maybe it will bring down enhanced growth, doubly laughable. Now the evidence. First I will present international evidence on the ratio of personal income tax to GDP and then evidence of the ratio of all taxes to GDP. I know many Indians think they are unique and the same red blood does not flow through them as of 6.5 billion others in the world. Let us accept that the most comparable countries in the world are non-advanced countries. We want to get there, but we are not there yet. And unless we make policy corrections, we won't be there even in 2047. Regarding personal income taxation, the Indian government's own data and projections suggest that expect that is ratio of personal income taxes to GDP will reach 3.9% of GDP in FY25. How exceptional is this performance? Very outside of advanced countries, there is no regional average of even comes close. Eastern Europe is the highest 3.4% in 2019, the last full year before the pandemic. Both post 2019 data are available for very few countries. The experts on growth just love to compare our growth performance with China or Vietnam. Bangladesh has fallen off the map after its crisis. The latest IMF information for Bangladesh is available for 2016 when expat was 0.85%. No typo here, growth stalwarts China and Vietnam are also much lower than India, expat of 1.1 and 1.8 respectively. Korea is somewhat higher than at 4.8% but likely lower than the post 2019 period. Brazil and Mexico are 3 and 3.4%. One objection to the above analysis on personal income taxes is that countries find other taxes to make up for their revenue needs. A fair objection, which is why we will look at the ratio of all taxes to GDP. The situation is no better if one looks at X tax, maybe even worse. The latest FY25 ratio for India is likely to reach upwards 19% of GDP. Advanced country average was 25% in 2019, likely lower today. East Asia is 13.5%, China and Vietnam 15%, 14%. Korea and USA direct tax collection much higher than India. For overall tax ratio, both economies are nearly identical to India. Korea at 20 and USA at 19%. The average per capita income in these two countries is more than 8 times of poor India. How obviously not much compensation by other countries for pit collection. In India it is up and away for all tax collection. Don't think that this excessive taxation is costless. It leads to excessive and wasteful government spending, freebies and as articulated by Modi, it also leads to discomfort among the middle classes who pays most of the taxes. This discomfort is a likely explanation for the surprising decline in popularity of the BJP and Modi in the nation national elections 7 months ago. It is also responsible for the decline in GDP growth, higher taxes, no foreign investment, and high real interest rates. What did the deep state think would happen? The role of IMF and World Bank and other international experts need to be examined in some detail. Who provided this tax advice? Why? There has been a discussion about the lopsided recommendation of the GST Council, advice that at least generated some humor with regard to sugar and popcorn. The income tax records, however, are a no laughing matter. For close to 20 years, the governments have been talking about direct tax reform, talked and badly acted. The time for remedial action is now, tomorrow, or latest by February 1. In my next few articles, I will document how much is right in India about job growth and gender equality, and how much is wrong with policies enacted not by people but by deep state. A moral failure, clamor for death penalty for Arjikar convict is self-defeating. A Kolkata court sentenced Sanjay Roy to life imprisonment after he was convicted for rape and murder of 31-year-old doctor at a state-run Arjikar Medical College and Hospital. The entire country, particularly West Bengal, witnessed massive public outrage after this ghastly event in August. It will not be wrong to say for almost everybody from Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee to these young doctors, students are celebrating celebrities demanding justice, or the streets of Kolkata was expecting nothing less than a capital punishment for Roy. A milder punishment for like live imprisonment seems to have disappointed them. From noisy debates to Bengali news channels to the addas in local tea shops, you hear a passionate plea for death penalty. Amid this mass support for death penalty, it is not easy to articulate even the slightest ambiguity towards it. With deep empathy, I try to make sense of the mental state of bereaved parents of the doctor and even those who experience the violence. There are three reasons I oppose the very idea of death penalty. My first argument is moral and existential. Capital punishment is an act of violence even if it is legitimized by the state and its law and order machinery. And one form of violence can no means be a solution to other form of violence. I agree with Amnesty International when it unambiguously states that capital punishment is the most inhumane and degrading punishment, almost like committing the same violence the state otherwise condemns. Moreover, every act of capital punishment reveals our collective failure or inability to work with the rapist or the murderer or the terrorist, understand his inner uh, turmoil,